He was once one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the country until he lost everything after being betrayed by his business partner. She was an orphan girl, forced to sell paper foxes on the street just to survive. Their chance encounter became the start of a new life and the most dangerous chapter in their story. Welcome to Heartland Stories. I'm Ethan Hale, and here I share true stories about honor, kindness, and quiet strength. Today, I'll tell you about Michael Bennett, a man who lost his company, his reputation, and even his belief in himself. And about Emma, an extraordinarily gifted girl who grew up without parents, living on the edge of survival, yet never lost her spirit. Together, they found in each other what they had both been missing all their lives: connection, warmth, and a new family. But can they uncover the truth and expose one of the largest financial frauds in the nation, a scheme that shattered thousands of lives? Or will the system silence them before the truth can be heard? If you're ready to find out how a brilliant homeless girl and a man who'd lost everything dared to challenge the powerful, hit like and let's begin. Not long ago, Michael Bennett looked down on the city from the top. His office was on the 52nd floor, in a tower that caught the morning sun like a mirror. Back then, he thought he had it all. His name was on the door of one of Chicago's biggest investment firms. Bankers shook his hand, senators called him directly, boardrooms welcomed him like family. Now, he stood in the window of a modest apartment, staring down at the same city, but it no longer felt like his. The sound of traffic below felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. Everything that once filled his world vanished in 6 weeks. His business partner of over 30 years, Victor Sutters, had betrayed him, laundered billions into offshore accounts, left Michael facing charges and empty bank statements. No one would have believed it if he hadn't seen the documents himself. Every move calculated, every detail covered. But what hurt more than losing the money was how quickly people disappeared. People he thought were friends. The apartment was quieter now. Old furniture, boxes he never unpacked. Only a half-empty crystal decanter reminded him of who he used to be. Michael rarely drank, but that night, he poured a glass. The doctor's words echoed in his head. Your blood pressure's dangerously high. The stress is killing you. He gave a dry laugh. Of course it is. Who wouldn't crack after all that? He remembered the day they escorted him out of his office under watch, employees turning their eyes away. Remembered how he signed away decades of work in silence. At 58, he felt older than ever. The tailored suits hung untouched in the closet. Now he wore stretched-out sweaters and discount pants. What have I really left behind? He whispered to his reflection. Numbers on a screen. Company walls they'll repaint by Monday. Not a single person left beside me. Outside the window, the first snow was falling. People hurried along the sidewalks, heading to jobs, picking up kids, grabbing groceries. Real life. The kind he'd lost track of a long time ago. He'd spent years in a world of numbers and risk, convinced that was what mattered. Michael finished his drink and set down the glass. The next morning, he decided to go out. No plan, no destination, just a walk. He had no idea that simple walk would change everything. The next day greeted Michael with cold, steady rain. He didn't bother with an umbrella, just threw on his old coat and stepped out, no idea where he was headed. The gray streets of Chicago bustled with people ducking under umbrellas, cars hissing across the wet asphalt. But Michael didn't feel the cold. Inside, he was empty. As he passed an old bookstore, long since shut down, he slowed his pace. Beneath the awning, barely shielded from the rain, sat a little girl, maybe 8 years old, wrapped in a thin jacket. In front of her, neatly arranged paper figures. Origami. Foxes, cranes, frogs. Each one folded with precision, with care. The kind of detail you'd expect from a seasoned artisan, not a child sitting alone in the rain. Michael almost kept walking, like everyone else. But then the girl looked up. Her eyes were clear, serious, too serious for a child. Their eyes met, and he stopped. Would you like to buy one? She asked calmly. No begging, no whining. Just steady confidence. $1 each. If they stay dry, they'll last forever. Michael stepped closer and crouched down. He picked up a small paper fox. It was flawless, balanced, symmetrical, like it had been measured and mapped. You make these yourself? He asked. Yeah. The fox is my favorite, she said. But the crane's the hardest. She adjusted the edge of the cloth where her creations were laid out. What's your name? He asked. Emma, she said, still looking him straight in the eye. And your parents? She froze for just a second. My grandma's in the hospital. I'm by myself for now. But I'm okay. Across the street, two men in hooded jackets stood talking, glancing their way. Michael noticed. He didn't know who they were, but something in his gut shifted, an old instinct flaring back to life. How much for all of them? He asked suddenly. Emma blinked. $23. There's 23. He pulled out his wallet, handed her 40. Keep the change. You're probably hungry. Let's get something to eat. She hesitated, just for a moment, then quickly packed the figures into a worn-out backpack and gave a small nod. They found a little old diner 2 blocks away. Warm lights, the smell of coffee and bacon comforting in a way the day hadn't been. Emma sat by the window, still clutching her backpack tight against her chest, like she was afraid someone might try to take it. The waitress came by with a menu, but Emma spoke up right away. Turkey sandwich. No sauce. And a glass of water, please. You sure? Michael asked. She nodded. He ordered a coffee and sat across from her, quietly watching her eat. She wasn't in a rush. Every bite was deliberate, like part of a routine. He didn't say anything, just watched and wondered how a kid living on the streets could carry herself with such calm. Like this wasn't new to her. Like she'd done it all before. When she finished eating, Emma picked up a napkin and a pen from the table. She flipped the napkin over and started drawing. At first, Michael figured she was doodling, passing time. But then he caught a glimpse of what she was writing. Not pictures. Formulas. Real ones. Complex. He leaned in closer. What's that? He asked. Emma quickly covered the napkin with her hand. For a split second, fear flickered in her eyes. Then, slowly, she moved her hand away. Just numbers, she said quietly. It helps me think. Michael took the napkin. A series of expressions, logarithms, patterns, something to do with probability and optimization. He couldn't tell exactly what she was working on, but one thing was clear. This wasn't third-grade math. Not even close. Where'd you learn this? He asked. She shrugged. Read what I could. My grandma had a couple books. I figured out the rest. Sometimes I snuck into the library. Sometimes I just listened in on classes. Michael didn't speak. All he could think was, this isn't just a smart kid. This is a rare kind of mind, a kind no one's noticed. You know this is really advanced, right? He said quietly. What's so hard about it? She replied. It's just structure. Things make sense when you count right. He looked at her. So small, so alone, and so unbelievably sharp. Something inside him, long frozen, began to thaw. Emma, he said gently, would you like to? Rest a little? I've got a couch back at my place. Just for the night. You be a guest. That's all. She didn't answer right away. There was a long pause. Why are you doing this? She asked, looking him straight in the eye. He didn't know what to say. Not right away. It had been a long time since anyone asked him something that honest. Because, he said finally, I know what it feels like to be walked past. And you deserve to be seen. Michael's apartment was small but neat. Emma looked around in silence, gray furniture, bare walls, a stack of books in the corner. She sat on the edge of the couch, backpack still clutched tight. Even here, in the warmth, she stayed guarded, like her body hadn't gotten the message that she was safe. Michael set the kettle on the stove, pulled out a folded blanket, and placed it gently beside her. There's a room back there, he said, but it's more of a workspace. We can use the couch for now. It pulls out. If you want, just for the night. I don't expect anything from you. Emma stared at him without blinking. Why are you helping me? The question came out simple, but it carried weight. Michael sat across from her, lowered himself into a chair. I lost everything not long ago. The money, my work, people I trusted. And not one person offered me a hand. But you're 8, alone, out there on the street, and you're not asking for anything. Just sitting there, folding foxes. He paused, let the silence settle. Maybe I don't want to walk past anymore. Maybe I'm tired of pretending not to see. Emma gave a small nod. Slowly, she unzipped her backpack and pulled out a folded sweater. Without a word, she lay down on the couch, still in her socks, curled up tight. Michael turned off the light. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, watching through the crack in the door as she tucked the backpack under her arm like it was the one thing she couldn't afford to lose. He stood there quietly, and for the first time in a long time, felt something rise in him again. A sense of purpose. A reason to stay standing. The next morning, Michael called City Social Services. He didn't know exactly what to say, so he told the truth. 3 hours later, someone knocked on his door. Michael Bennett? The voice was firm, official. Yes. A woman in her 40s stood on the threshold, hair pulled back in a tight bun, file folder in hand, eyes sharp and cautious. Jennifer Cole, Child Protective Services. You called. He let her in. She scanned the apartment quickly, with the trained eye of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Where's the girl? In the other room. Making origami, he said. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You do realize you violated protocol by taking in a child without clearance? That can come with consequences. I know. But she has no one. Her grandmother's in the hospital. She's been living on the street. And Michael hesitated. If you take her now, she'll be alone again. We have procedures, she said firmly. I'm supposed to place her in emergency foster care. Please. I'm not asking to keep her forever. Just until we know more. Until she's safe. Jennifer looked at him for a long moment, then asked, You're that Bennett? From Bennett Capital? Used to be, he replied. Huh. I remember you from an ethics panel years back. You weren't too fond of family assistance programs back then. Michael gave a quiet nod. It stung, but it was fair. And yet here you are, asking to care for a child. People change, he said. Especially after they've lost everything. She walked to the door of the room, knocked lightly. Emma opened it just a little, looked at the woman calmly. Hi, Emma, Jennifer said gently. I'd like to ask you a few things. Is that okay? Half an hour later, they came out together. Jennifer looked thoughtful. She's very sharp. Explained everything herself. Clear. Calm. No drama. So, is it possible? I don't know, she admitted. But it might be worth trying. She pulled a form from her folder. Temporary guardianship. Just until we sort things out. I'll be making unannounced visits. Michael signed without hesitation. When Jennifer left, he closed the door and leaned against it for a second, letting out a quiet breath. Emma stood nearby, still guarded, still quiet. It's all right, he said softly. You're here now. That's what matters. 2 days later, Michael and Emma sat in the hallway of the county family courthouse. Around them, quiet voices murmured. A few parents held children's hands. Lawyers flipped through paperwork. Michael could feel the sweat on his palms. He'd stood before a judge before, back when the stakes were measured in dollars. Today, it was something far more personal. The bench was cold beneath him. Emma sat still beside him, calm, like it was just another morning. Her backpack rested by her feet, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Nervous? Michael asked. A little. You? Very. She nodded, without a smile, but her eyes were warm. The courtroom door opened, and a clerk called them in. The judge was a woman in her 60s, short gray hair, sharp eyes. She scanned the documents, then looked at Michael. Mr. Bennett, you're petitioning for temporary guardianship of a child with no legal relation to you. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Given your recent history, bankruptcy, an open investigation, a significant loss of standing, are you sure this is a sound decision? Michael started to speak, but stopped himself. He felt something next to him. Emma's hand slipped into his. She didn't say a word, just held on. He looked down at her, then back at the judge. Then, suddenly, he said, Your Honor, I'd like to amend my request. The judge raised an eyebrow. Amended how? Michael straightened his back. I'm not asking for temporary guardianship. I'm asking to adopt her. I want permanent custody of Emma. The room froze. From the front row, Jennifer dropped her pen. The judge removed her glasses. Mr. Bennett, do you understand what you're saying? I do. I don't have family. I don't have a 5-year plan. But she needs someone who's going to stay. I can't offer her perfection, but I can offer her a home. No conditions. No deadlines. The judge flipped through the pages in silence, then turned to Emma. Do you agree to this? Yes, Emma said softly. He sees me. No one ever did before. After a long pause, the judge finally spoke. I'll grant a provisional approval while we complete the full review. If everything checks out, you'll both have your chance. They left the courtroom quietly. Outside, on the steps, Emma looked up at him. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to go that far. I know, Michael said, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, not fear, but hope. But maybe that's the whole point. Doing the right thing, just because it's right. The first few weeks under one roof were a real test. For Emma, because trust wasn't something she gave easily. For Michael, because he had no clue how to be a parent. He used to manage offices, investment funds, lawsuits over billion-dollar deals. Now, he stood in the middle of his kitchen, staring into an open fridge at 3 eggs, a piece of cheese, and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. What counts as a normal breakfast, he muttered to himself. I can make scrambled eggs, came a voice from behind. He turned around. Emma was already barefoot in the kitchen, hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Grandma taught me, back when she could still stand, she said, taking the eggs from his hands. He watched as she cracked them into a bowl, no hesitation, no waste, just focus. There was something heartbreakingly adult in how she moved. You shouldn't have to cook, he said gently. That's my job now. Emma shrugged. We do what needs to be done. Always have. He didn't know how to answer that. School wasn't easy either. After her placement tests, they bumped her up 2 grades. Even then, she was bored. She rarely raised her hand, but when she did, the teachers didn't always understand what she was saying. Sometimes they got irritated. One evening, her math teacher called. Mr. Bennett, we need to discuss your daughter's behavior. She corrected me in class, in front of the students, offered an alternative solution, told me my method was too long. Michael felt a knot tighten in his chest. Was she wrong? A pause. No. Her method is mathematically sound. It's just not how we teach it. After the call, he found Emma sitting on the floor, surrounded by notebooks. Why'd you do it? He asked. Because it's faster, she said. Her way takes 14 steps. Mine takes 8. Sometimes, being right isn't enough, he said. You have to know how to say it. Emma lowered her eyes. I didn't mean to be rude. But she was teaching it wrong. At night, he started to notice just how much hurt she carried inside. A few times, he woke to the sound of her crying out soft, scared. He'd walk into her room and find her curled up, clutching a pillow. At first, he didn't know what to do. So he just sat beside her, silent. Eventually, she started sleeping more peacefully. One day, while changing her sheets, he found cookies, apples, granola bars, each one wrapped and hidden under the mattress. Emma, why are you stashing food? She froze in the doorway, then whispered. On the street, if you didn't hide it, you lost it. You're not on the street anymore, he said softly. I promise. You're not going to go hungry here. She nodded. But the next week, he found more snacks hidden in a different spot. That's when he understood. Trust wasn't something you asked for. You earned it. Over time. As the days passed, the apartment started to change. Michael replaced his old finance magazines with kids' books and math workbooks. The fridge door filled up with drawings, school papers, and little notes like dinner at 6 and don't forget, algebra test. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, coming home with groceries, he opened the door and heard music. Emma was dancing on her tiptoes between the kitchen and the living room, holding a hairbrush like a microphone. He didn't say a word, just watched. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something warm and quiet rise inside him. Home. It started with another call from the school, but this time, it wasn't a teacher on the line. It was the principal himself. Mr. Bennett, the voice was both nervous and puzzled. We need to talk about Emma. Right away. That same day, Michael drove to the school. They brought him into an office where the principal, the school psychologist, and 2 teachers were waiting. On the desk, Emma's notebooks, a stack of test papers, and pages of printouts. We ran extended testing, the principal began. The regular assessments weren't giving us the full picture. So we reached out to a university, asked them to send us materials from their first-year math program. Emma completed everything in one evening. Michael looked at the pile. And what does that mean? It means she's not just bright, the psychologist cut in. She sees patterns others don't. She doesn't just solve equations, she reimagines how they work. Her methods are unconventional, but mathematically flawless. We believe she has a unique cognitive profile, something beyond logic. It's like her mind works through structure, intuitively. Michael tried to process it. You're saying she's a genius? By every measure we can see, yes, said one of the teachers softly. Possibly one of those minds that come along once in a generation. On the drive home, Emma sat quietly in the back seat. Her legs didn't reach the floor, so she swung them back and forth, lost in thought. You knew? Michael asked, catching her eyes in the rearview mirror. That you're different? That I'm smarter than most? She said, shrugging. I tried not to show it. On the street, standing out gets you hurt. Easier to stay invisible. People leave you alone. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. She hadn't just hidden her fear, she'd hidden her brilliance. Because being herself had never felt safe. Here, he said softly, you can be whoever you are. Even if you're smarter than all of us combined. For the first time that day, she smiled. Barely. But it was real. Then I need a new notebook. I filled this one. He nodded. We'll get a whole stack. Not just notebooks. If you're ready to grow, I'm right here with you. Always. The invitation came in a thick, cream-colored envelope with embossed lettering. In the bottom corner, a handwritten note read, Michael, would love to see you there. Margaret. It was for the annual Chicago Development Fund Gala, the kind of event where Michael used to give toasts and raise millions. Now, he was going as a guest, wearing a name badge that wasn't his own, and with a little girl by his side. Is this like a ball? Emma asked, studying the blue dress they'd picked out the day before. More like a night where everyone pretends they don't care who's around, just how you look. Sounds like school, but with food. Michael chuckled. That evening, they stepped into a room filled with soft music, clinking glasses, and quiet conversations under crystal chandeliers. Heads turned. Some people recognized him. Some didn't. He felt their glances, curious, polite, judgmental. But then he looked at Emma. In her neat little dress, shoulders back, chin high. She held his hand, steady. This wasn't just support. This was a team. Margaret came over, warm and genuine, the one colleague who hadn't walked away after the collapse. Michael. I'm really glad you came, she said, hugging him. Then she crouched down to Emma's level. And you must be Emma. I've heard a lot about you. Emma simply nodded. Dinner went on without drama until Nathan Sutters took the mic. Still as smooth as ever, still smiling with only the corners of his mouth, never the eyes. Our new analytics tool can predict market downturns with 87% accuracy, he said, flipping through polished slides. Michael felt Emma's hand tense around his. His variable is wrong, she whispered. What? His model's flawed. He's ignoring cumulative effect and long-term downturns. It's right there. Emma. I can prove it. Before he could stop her, she raised her hand. The room quieted. Excuse me, she said calmly. Your risk variable is underweight. By about 40%. You're not factoring in secondary cycles and cumulative deviations. Sutters froze. A few heads turned. One of the senior analysts in the room, Walter Simmons, leaned forward. Kid, you mind showing us what you mean? Emma took a napkin and a pen. Within minutes, she'd drawn out the equations and a graph. Simmons studied it closely, then looked up at Sutters. She's right. There's a gap in your model. Sutters clenched his jaw. His eyes darted to Michael, cold and sharp. Teaching street kids finance now, Bennett? No, Michael said evenly. Just listening when someone says something smart. The evening continued, but the mood had changed. Sutters left early. Back at the table, Emma leaned in close. There's something off in his numbers. Something dishonest. Michael looked at her. She wasn't guessing. And for the first time in months, he felt something more than pride. He felt the pull of unfinished business. This story wasn't over. It was just getting started. Something shifted after the gala. Not all at once. Not loudly. But it was there, undeniable. What had once felt like a fragile arrangement held together by caution was beginning to feel solid. Real. Michael stopped waking up at night to check whether Emma's door was locked. And Emma no longer kept her backpack by the head of her bed. Then, one morning over breakfast, she said it. Casually. Like it wasn't the most important thing she'd ever asked. Can I repaint my room? He looked up, surprised. Of course. What color? I was thinking, light green. Like spring grass. Grandma said that color helps you feel calm. They went to the store together. Emma picked out brushes, paint, wallpaper with a simple pattern. Michael didn't steer her. He just paid, carried the bags, and let her lead. That weekend, they painted side by side in old clothes, covered in smudges and laughter. Drips on the floor, splatters on their sleeves. Chaos that felt like joy. Emma played music on her phone and even danced a little while rolling paint across the walls. Michael realized, almost with surprise, how long it had been since anything had felt light. Next came the kitchen. The gray cabinets were replaced with shelves full of bright dishes, jars of rice and pasta, sticky notes on the fridge. Don't forget milk. Biotest Friday. Little plants lined the windowsill. Emma named one of them Ben. In the living room, they built a new bookshelf. Half of it held math books. The other half, fairy tales and science fiction. Michael pulled out an old box of photos. It had been buried deep in the closet. Now, a few of them sat in simple frames. A shot of him with his parents. Emma in her school uniform. The two of them at the park, under a blue Sunday sky. One night, when he came in to say goodnight, she looked up and asked, "Is this forever now?" He sat down on the edge of the bed. "I hope so. Then I want to make a name sign for my door," she said. "Not just Emma. I wanted to say Emma Bennett." He felt his throat tighten, deep in his chest. He nodded. "That's a great idea." That night, in the quiet stillness of their home, Michael understood something. His life no longer had empty rooms, and the loneliness he once believed was permanent was finally gone. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that tapped gently on the windows without making a fuss. Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, papers spread out around her. They were old reports, documents from Michael's former company, Bennett Capital. He didn't keep them for nostalgia. They were a reminder of how fast everything could fall apart. "What are you doing with those?" he asked, walking by with a mug of tea. "Just looking," she said without looking up. "I was going through the operations report. These numbers don't line up." "They don't?" "Nope. The annual report says one thing, the quarterly reports say another. It's not rounding differences. This is manipulation." Michael set down his mug and sat beside her. Emma handed him a page, the numbers neatly underlined in pencil. She spoke plainly, but with precision, pointing out inconsistencies, variable mismatches, repeating patterns. The more he looked, the more it hit him. This wasn't carelessness. "This isn't sloppy bookkeeping," he murmured. "No," she said. "It's deliberate. Someone designed this to mask fund withdrawals. The numbers are buried under surplus reserve variables. Almost invisible. Almost." Michael ran a hand over his face. "God. I've looked at these reports so many times. I was searching for answers. It was right there the whole time." Emma glanced at him. "You were too close. And you trusted too much. Victor." She nodded. "His signature's on every one of these. And here," she said, pointing to another sheet, "this new calculation method only shows up in the last year." That's when the cracks started. Michael felt the heat rising in his chest again, shame, anger, betrayal. "I lost everything because I believed we were building something together." "You didn't lose," Emma said calmly. "You just didn't know who you were playing against." He looked at her. There was no blame in her voice. No judgment. Just truth. Clear and steady. "Can we prove this?" he asked. "If you give me access to the archived files and server backups, yeah. I think I can build a model that maps the anomalies and shows where they started." Michael nodded, slowly. "Then let's start." Emma gathered the papers into a tidy stack. "Michael, you don't just want the truth. You want your name back." He clenched his fist, voice low. "I want the truth out. Even if it's late. Even if it's not for me anymore." Emma gave a small, sideways smile. "Sometimes the most important things start when you think everything's over." The next day, Michael made his first call. To Susan Miller, former head of internal audit at Bennett Capital. When everything fell apart, she was one of the few who didn't walk away, but she hadn't gotten involved either. Back then, she had a family, kids, a mortgage. Now they had a common enemy. "Susan, are you free tonight? There's something I need to show you. It matters." She came without questions. Same sharp eyes. Same folder in hand. A few more wrinkles. A quieter voice. "What are you up to, Michael?" He gestured toward the living room, where Emma had already laid out printouts, charts, formulas. "This is my daughter, Emma. She found what we all missed." Susan glanced at the girl, then leaned over the documents. Are these fund redistribution models?" With distortions, Emma answered. Here's the normal flow. But here, it's masked. Fund shifting, fake transactions, buried under formulas that almost no one would spot. Susan turned slowly to Michael. This isn't negligence. This was built. Victor, Michael said. And maybe not just him. They stayed up late into the night, sorting through old records, mapping connections, marking key names, attorneys, accountants, consultants. People who had been close. People who, it now seemed, had known more than they let on. We'll need more, Susan said. Internal emails. Server logs. I've still got something, Michael replied. An encrypted archive. External drive. It's in my safety deposit box. Good, she said. Then we start. That's how Project Phoenix was born, an unofficial team of 3. 1. A fallen businessman. 2. A gifted child whose childhood ended too soon. 3. A professional who was tired of watching the truth drown in red tape. Every day, they met in Michael's home. The kitchen table became their war room. Emma wrote code, ran anomaly models. Susan made calls to former employees, some whispered, some hung up. Michael kept the lists, tracked the pieces, and wondered what would happen if this all came to light. They didn't know where it would lead. But they knew one thing for certain: silence was no longer an option. One night, as they were packing up, Emma asked, "Why Phoenix?" Michael looked at her. "Because even if you burn to the ground, you can rise again. You just have to want it." The next day, Jennifer showed up unannounced. No call, no warning, just like she'd promised. But this time, something was different. Less concern, more cold professionalism. "Michael," she said, glancing around the room. "How are things here?" "We're doing well. Emma's doing great in school. You've seen the reports," he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. Jennifer walked through the space slowly, pausing near the kitchen table, where a few documents still lay scattered. Her eyes lingered on one of Emma's diagrams. Then, almost casually, she reached toward the bookshelf, adjusted a notepad. Nothing that looked suspicious. Except Michael knew Jennifer never lingered like that before. When she left, he shut the door quietly and turned to Susan. "Something's off," he said. "You noticed?" She nodded. "I checked. Her car's got a short-range antenna on the roof. Professional-grade transmitter. And I'm pretty sure the apartment's bugged." "Who? Who else?" "Sutter's. He must have figured out we're getting close. Jennifer's his plant. Maybe she's been one for a while." Michael paced the room, fists clenched. "We got comfortable. Thought if we kept our heads down, no one would notice. We're digging under the foundation of a man who built an empire on lies," Susan said. "He's not going to let it go quietly." They gathered the 3 of them, Michael, Susan, Emma, around the kitchen table. Emma listened in silence, her eyes sharp and focused. "We need to move faster," Michael said. "We can't wait for him to make the first move." Susan pulled out a folder. "I'll start transferring key data to secure drives. We destroy the originals. New logins, new encryption. Everything that links back to us goes completely offline. I'll rewrite the algorithm into a new framework," Emma added. "If they see anything, it won't make sense to them." Michael nodded. "We're not amateurs anymore. We play this smart. One step ahead, always." He looked at Emma. "You sure you're ready for this?" She didn't answer right away. Then she looked up and said, calm and clear, "He won't break us. Not this time." It happened at midnight. The house should have been asleep. Outside, the rain fell steady, soft, just loud enough to cover footsteps. Michael woke up with a jolt. His heart was racing, pounding too fast. He didn't know why at first. Then he heard it, a faint, mechanical click. The front door lock. He jumped out of bed, moved down the hallway without a sound. Left the lights off. 2 shadows stood outside the door. Broad, heavy. One was working on the lock. The other stood watch. Not cops. Not burglars. He knew it instantly. They weren't here for valuables. They were here for something else. For information. He opened Emma's door. She was already awake. In the corner, her laptop was still open. Beside her, Susan. Both fully dressed. Like they'd been waiting for this. "They're here," Michael whispered. Susan grabbed a flash drive and a notebook, nodded once. "Back exit. Fire escape." "And you?" he asked. "I'll hold them off. You'll have time." Emma opened her mouth, but Michael raised a hand. "Listen to me. Right now, the only thing that matters is protecting what we've built. What you built. You can do this. She looked at him, not like a child, like an equal. Then she nodded. And without another word, she followed Susan out the back. Michael stayed behind. He stepped into the front hallway. The lock clicked. Almost open. He opened the door himself, stared straight into the face of a man in a dark jacket. The guy flinched. He hadn't expected that. "Who are you?" Michael asked, voice calm. "We're here to check in on your caseworker. She sent us. Wanted a quick inspection." At 2 in the morning? Silence. The man glanced at his partner. A mistake. Michael slammed the door shut and threw the bolt, grabbed his phone and dialed, loud, on speaker. "Yes, this is Michael Bennett. There's an attempted break-in at my home. I've already shared the data with law enforcement. If anything happens to me, it's going straight to the press." Silence behind the door. Then quick footsteps. Within a minute, they were gone. Michael slid down the wall and sat on the floor. His chest ached from the tension, but he was breathing. There was no going back now. But he knew one thing for certain. They'd made it. Emma and Susan were out. The algorithm was safe. And the truth was finally within reach. The apartment fell silent the moment the back door clicked shut behind Emma and Susan. Michael stayed behind by choice. He knew they'd come looking for him. He was meant to be the one they watched. 15 minutes later, there was a knock. Not loud, just businesslike. He opened the door. 2 men stood there. Black jackets, official-looking badges, the kind with eagles and vague government seals. "Financial Threat Control Division," one said. "Mr. Bennett, we have a few questions." "Where's the girl?" asked the taller one, thin, with a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. Michael kept calm. "I don't know. She's not involved in any of this." "We disagree," said the other. "She's smart. Too smart. Hard to believe it's just coincidence. You, the archives, and a child writing algorithms our consultants can't even decode." They walked into the apartment without asking. One stopped at the bookshelf. The other glanced at the laptop on the table, blank screen. No trace. "You're digging too deep, Michael," one of them said, stepping closer. "This kind of thing doesn't end well. Victor Sutters doesn't like old partners stirring up dust in the records." Michael clenched his jaw. "And I don't like people being left with nothing while the guilty walk free." A pause. Eye contact, long, unwavering. Like a warning shot that didn't need a trigger. "This isn't a threat," the quieter one said. "It's a reminder. About consequences." Then they left. Silent. Like they were never there. Minutes later, Michael felt it. Something wrong. Heavy. A burning pain in his chest. He gripped the edge of the table, but the room was already slipping away. His heartbeat staggered. Breath shallow. He took one step, then collapsed. He woke up in a hospital bed. White ceiling. For drip. Steady hum of machines. A doctor stood beside him. "It was a heart attack. You're lucky someone found you when they did." Michael tried to speak, but couldn't. He barely whispered. "The girl, where is she? Is she safe?" The doctor gave no answer. Only a confused look. Miles away, in a rented house tucked outside the city, Emma was logging into a secure system. Susan had drawn the blinds. Signal jammers were on. Emma opened her laptop, entered a passcode, and accessed the protected channel. Status: Object M, hospitalized. Under observation. Project Phoenix moving to Phase 2. Communication secured. Susan leaned in. "You think he knew it would come to this?" Emma nodded. "He chose us. Now it's our turn, not to let him down." Outside, rain tapped gently on the roof. Back in the hospital, a small light blinked on the bedside monitor. Phoenix activated. Michael smiled, just faintly. He knew they'd made it. And now, the real work was just beginning. 3 days had passed. Michael sat on a bench in a small park across from the hospital. On his lap, a discharge summary. In his hand, a paper cup of cold coffee. He had insisted on an early release, despite the doctor's protests. They hadn't sugar-coated it. "Another episode like that, and you might not make it back. Then I'd better use the time I've got," he told them. Susan and Emma were waiting when he got out. They helped him into the rental house, where everything was already set up: files, charts, laptops. He didn't speak much the first day, just listened, took it in. With each hour, his posture straightened. His eyes sharpened. He knew there was no turning back now. Emma sat by the window, fingers moving over the keyboard with a focus far beyond her years. The table was covered in papers, diagrams of shell transactions, handwritten calculations. Done, she said finally. The algorithm's finished. It tracks movement through proxy accounts, detects repeating patterns, flags any attempt to cover the trail. We'll be able to prove exactly where the money went, live, as it happens. Susan leaned over her shoulder, eyes scanning the code. Now we just need to lure him in. He has to want to see what we've built. We'll drop a fake leak, Emma added. Files claiming to expose another offshore network. He won't resist. Even if he suspects it's bait, he'll take it. He has to know. Michael stepped closer. He still looked tired, but his voice was steady. Then we'll build him a mirror. And when he looks into it, he won't see a reflection. He'll see a verdict. Susan hit send. The decoy file slipped into the network, routed through layered servers, cloaked and scattered. The hook was set. Now they waited. Emma closed the laptop and looked out the window. The cold light of morning just beginning to break through the clouds. All that's left, she said quietly, is for him to step into his own trap. The conference was held in a towering glass hall on the north side of Chicago. The annual investment forum drew hundreds, bankers, economists, startup founders, journalists. But this year, they were all waiting for one thing. Victor Sutter's keynote on revised crisis strategies. Instead, a different figure walked onto the stage. Michael Bennett. The room fell into a hush, as if someone had suddenly turned down the volume. He was pale, lean, but stood steady. Black suit, folder in hand. No fanfare. No bodyguards. No headlines. I haven't spoken publicly in over a year, he began calmly. Because I believe that truth, no matter how long it's ignored, finds a way to surface. Today, I'm here to show you what it looks like. Behind him, a graph appeared on the massive screen. At first, it looked like any standard financial report. Then spikes. Unusual transaction patterns. Money jumping between accounts in strange, unexplained ways. This is the internal reporting structure from Bennett Capital for the years 2018 to 2021, he continued. At first glance, nothing seems off, until you overlay it with merger activity from subsidiary funds. He clicked the remote. The screen shifted. Dots connected into lines. Money flowed through closed loops. Shell companies. Offshore accounts, some in jurisdictions few professionals ever dared to name aloud. This is how it worked, Michael said. Employee pensions, private investor money, government subsidies, all cycled through dozens of front organizations. On paper, legal. In reality, a massive theft. Some will say I should have known. Maybe they're right. But I know this. I was the first to be devoured by this machine. And today, I'm presenting the proof. With details. With names. He opened the folder. Inside, printouts Emma and Susan had verified and rebuilt. This isn't revenge. It's redemption. For my name. For my employees. For my family. And maybe for your conscience. The hall was silent. No applause. No outbursts. Just the kind of stillness that follows truth when it's spoken out loud for the first time in a long time. In the shadows near a column, Victor Sutter stood motionless. His jaw clenched. His expression unreadable. Michael turned back to the crowd. I know some of you knew. Some of you stayed silent. Today, you have a chance to do otherwise. He closed the folder. Stepped down from the stage. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just sat there. Silent. The way a room goes quiet. When truth finally walks in. A few hours after Michael's speech, just as he'd gotten home and slipped off his jacket, his phone buzzed. An alert. Unknown number, secure line. He already knew who it was. Talk, Michael said, skipping any pleasantries. You did your little show, came Sutter's voice, calm, measured. No anger. No panic. Just cold calculation. I'll admit, it was impressive. I'd almost be impressed if I didn't know how this ends. It ends with you in prison, Michael replied. Not just for fraud, for betrayal. You destroyed people, Victor. Families. A pause. Then, I didn't call to argue. You've got your documents. But I've got leverage. You want a clean ending? I can make that happen. Half the assets, returned, legally. On the books. Quietly. People get their money. You get your name back. We wrap it up like grown men. No mess. Michael didn't answer right away. He stared out the window as wind scattered dry leaves across the pavement. Suddas kept going. You think the public's going to remember this a month from now? A year? 15 minutes of attention, and it's gone. Take what you can. Walk away. And the girl. He paused. She deserves peace, doesn't she? Just then, Emma walked into the room. She sat beside Michael, calm. He put the call on speaker. Victor, she said, voice steady. My dad doesn't take half-truths. He takes the whole truth. A soft chuckle from the line. How touching. But you don't understand, little girl. I understand perfectly, she cut in. You're used to winning because people quit before it really hurts. We don't. Michael pressed the red button. Call ended. Silence hung in the room for a few moments. Was that the right thing? Emma asked. He nodded. The only thing. If we settle for half, we become part of what we're fighting. And right then, Michael realized. He wasn't just fighting for his name anymore. He was fighting for who he had become. Beside her. That night, after Sudda's call, the apartment was still quiet like a library. Only the faint hum of streetlights outside and the occasional gust of wind tapping at the window reminded them that the world hadn't stopped turning. Michael sat on the couch, one hand holding a cooling cup of tea, the other gripping a printed report. His eyes were focused, but behind them exhaustion. Emma walked in without a sound, wrapped in a blanket. She sat beside him. He's going to try again, she said. Not with money this time. With people. With fear. I know, Michael said softly. You know, there was a time I might have taken the deal. Half the truth. Because I thought truth was just what you could prove in court. And now, he looked at her. Now I think truth is what you're willing to stand for. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Even when you're alone. But you're not alone, Emma said firmly. We're doing this together. He smiled, just slightly. Yeah, but you need to understand. The farther we go, the harder it gets. They'll threaten. They'll lie. They'll twist everything they can. This isn't a game. I don't think it's a game, Michael, she said calmly. I know it's a war. Only in this one, the weapons are numbers. And the bullets are fear. But we've got something they don't. What's that? Conscience. Michael didn't answer right away. Then he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then we go all the way. No deals. No compromises. All the way, she nodded. Silence settled in again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was solid. In that small room, surrounded by old books and folders, two people made a quiet decision. Truth was worth more than winning, and they weren't turning back. Everything was ready. Inside the folder, evidence, models, statements, transaction maps, emails, logins, internal memos. Each one gathered like a surgeon with a scalpel, quietly, precisely, with airtight documentation and legal accuracy. Every name vetted by Susan. Every number run through Emma's algorithm. Now it was time. Michael walked into the SEC office, Securities and Exchange Commission, early in the morning. His suit hung a little loose on his frame. In his hands, a neatly packed box. No lawyer. No press. No drama. Just a man. And the truth. I'm here to submit a voluntary statement regarding criminal activity in financial markets, he told the staffer at the front desk. I have documented evidence of large-scale fraud involving several high-ranking individuals. I'm willing to cooperate fully. When the box landed in the hands of investigators, the gears began to turn. For the first 48 hours, silence. Then motion. Phones ringing. Closed-door meetings. Briefings with agents from the Economic Crimes Division. By day 4, the first search warrants were executed. First, a tiny office on the city's edge where fake companies had been registered. Then, a bookkeeping contractor that had supposedly shut down 3 years ago. Next, a law firm that had worked with Sudda's under a rebranded name. The media caught wind fast. Headlines followed. SEC raids offices linked to Forbes investor. Michael Bennett returns. Whistleblower or revenge. Mainstream outlets stayed cautious, but independent reporters and bloggers lit up. Videos filled with graphs, clips from Michael's speech, quotes from Emma, who had unintentionally become a symbol of the new honest generation. Sudda's held out, issued statements, denied everything. appeared on television, flashing the same cool smile. "This is a smear campaign," he said. "Professional jealousy. Misrepresentation. It'll be disproven." But on day 6, the real fall began. The FBI searched his home, seized equipment, servers, files. His longtime CFO, one of his closest allies, cut a deal, gave a full statement, named names, explained the structure. Later that day, an SEC agent called Michael directly. "It's confirmed. Your material was key. We were close, but you gave us the strike. The real strike." Michael closed his eyes. What filled his chest wasn't relief. It was something heavier, but it was clean, like closing the last page of a long, bitter chapter. He looked across the room at Emma. She was at the laptop, drawing a new diagram. Not someone else's scheme. Her own. The future. "He's losing control," she said quietly. "And we're getting it back," Michael replied. "Not over money. Over ourselves." When it became clear the case against Sutters couldn't be stopped, he launched one final, desperate attack. But this time, the target wasn't the company or Michael. It was Emma. It started with a headline in a major financial publication. "Genius Girl or PR Pawn? Who's really behind the fall of Sutters?" Emma Bennett's story raises questions. How could a child without formal education decode complex algorithms? The next day, an interview with Jennifer, the former caseworker. Headline: "Social worker speaks out. I was used. That family isn't what they seem." Michael read it all in silence. His face like stone. His hands trembled. Emma sat next to him, showing no fear. But in her eyes, hurt. "They're betting on doubt," she said quietly. "If they can't destroy the truth, they'll try to destroy the person who told it." Michael walked to the window, gripping the arm of the chair. "We knew this would happen. But still. It's different when they come after you." Just then, a knock at the door. It was Jennifer. Her face, tired. In her hands, a folder. "I'm not here to excuse myself," she said. "I did pass information along. At first, out of fear. Then because I was convinced you were using her. And then, I realized I was wrong. Too late, but I realized it." She handed Michael the folder. "This is everything. Originals. Memos. Emails with Sutters people. Surveillance logs." In this, she held out a flash drive. "One call I recorded. The moment I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore." On the recording, Sutters' voice. "The girl's a threat. We erased them quietly, not forced out. Media's the weapon. People believe headlines, not evidence." It was enough. Susan sent the material straight to SEC attorneys. That same night, a leak hit the press. Attempt to discredit whistleblowers was a coordinated operation. Screenshots, audio, timelines. Public opinion turned fast. The next morning, day 8 after Michael's submission, Victor Sutters was arrested. Right outside his mansion. In a tailored jacket, suitcase in hand, he was walking to a car when 3 federal agents approached. "Victor Sutters, you are under arrest for financial fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and witness tampering. You have the right." He didn't resist. Just turned toward a camera filming from across the drive. His face blank, glassy-eyed. He knew. It was over. When Emma heard the news, she simply nodded. "I'm not happy. It's just quieter inside now." Michael took her hand. "That's because the truth speaks for itself now. And you're its voice." A week passed after Sutters' arrest. The headlines shifted, as they always do. New stories, new scandals took over the front pages. But in people's minds, one thing remained. The story of a girl who saw what others missed and wasn't afraid to speak up. Michael and Emma tried to return to something like normal life. As normal as it could be after all they'd been through. Emma continued to study on her own terms, at her own pace. They kept building out the foundation's projects, helping other children impacted by schemes like the one they'd exposed. Susan ran the investigative arm. Little by little, things were finding their place. One morning at breakfast, Michael placed a letter on the table. "From WSPX Studio," he said. "Invitation to an interview. Public television. Not commercial. The journalist solid, not chasing headlines." Emma didn't answer right away. She stared at the envelope, weighing not the request, but the weight of being seen. "Should I really do it?" "It's not about the spotlight," Michael said. "It's for the ones still scared. Still quiet. Maybe if you say a few words, someone will believe it's possible not to be afraid. She nodded. 3 days later, she sat in front of the camera. The interview was recorded in a small studio. No glamour, no fanfare, just a chair, a soft light, and Emma, wearing a dark blue dress, back straight, eyes steady. No posing, just presence. The journalist, a woman in her early 50s, began gently. Emma, to many, you've become an unexpected hero, but you're still just a child. How did you manage to do what most adults couldn't? I just saw something that didn't feel right, Emma said calmly. And I couldn't ignore it. But it wasn't just seeing. You uncovered a complex financial fraud. You helped restore justice. Where did you learn how to do that? I didn't really learn it, she replied. I read. I listened. I tried to understand. It's like a language. Only the words are numbers. What would you say to those who think you're too smart for your age? Who say someone else must have done the work for you? Emma looked up, right into the camera. Just for a moment. Math doesn't care how old you are. What matters is the truth. It either exists or it doesn't. And if you can prove it, your age doesn't matter. The room went quiet. That kind of silence where words don't just end. They echo. And now? What's next for you? I want to help. I want other kids to be heard, too, so they don't have to prove they matter. Just because they're small. After the shoot, she came home, dropped her backpack at the door, just like always. That evening, she and Michael had simple pasta with vegetables. On the news, in between segments, a clip from the interview played. He didn't say anything, just gave her a look, a quiet smile, pride behind his eyes. And she simply said, "Now let the truth speak for itself." 1 year later, they returned to the place where it had all begun. The corner of the old bookstore, beneath the gray awning, where once, on a rainy autumn day, a girl had stood with a backpack and paper foxes. But now, it was different. The walls were freshly painted. The sign was new. The Emma Bennett Foundation, math that changes lives. Inside, a support center for gifted kids from difficult homes. Workshops, mentors, hot meals, quiet, and safety. All the things she once went without. In the front window, under a soft light, stood the paper fox. The first one. Next to it, a plaque. Emma Bennett. Found. Understood. Seen. Michael stood beside her. In a dark coat. Hair now grayer at the temples. But eyes clear. "Remember this corner?" he asked. "Feels like yesterday," Emma said. "Back then, I thought you just walked by, like everyone else. And I thought you were just a kid. Turned out, you were my way back." She smiled. "And you were mine." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "And you know, every time I fill out a form that asks for relation, I write daughter. And every time I do, something quiet settles inside me." That word became true, she said. Legally, and in every other way. They stood in silence. Then Michael asked, quietly, "Do you ever think about your grandma?" Emma nodded, eyes lowered. "Almost every day, especially when I make oatmeal or fold shirts." She passed that same winter. In a free clinic. No papers. I found out after it was already over. Michael didn't speak, just squeezed her shoulder a little tighter. Emma went on, her voice steady. "But I think she saw that we made it, that I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Together, they stepped inside. Kids worked at tables. One boy at the board, still awkward, but confident. In the corner, a girl sat cross-legged, tracing triangles with colorful markers. On the wall hung a flag, not of a country, but of hope. White background, a blue fox, and the words, "Intelligence is not a luxury. Care is not a privilege." Before leaving, Emma reached into her coat pocket, took out a freshly folded paper fox. She turned and placed it gently on the outside window ledge. "For the next one," she said, "the one who sees it, the one who doesn't walk by." They stepped into the street and walked on, quietly, not as a hero and a former orphan, but as father and daughter, as two people who understood. When you give love, you don't lose it, you create it. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story.